Fort Bridger, Wyoming, February 2025. Storage Room C sits at the eastern edge of the facility, tucked between the equipment warehouse and a forgotten motor pool where rusted trucks go to die. A place where paperwork gets lost, where questions don't get asked, where three men can close a door and believe the world stops paying attention. They're wrong, but they won't know that for 11 more seconds. The wind outside carries the smell of diesel and snow. Inside, the air hangs stale and heavy. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, casting shadows that don't quite reach the corners. A clipboard rests on a metal bench. Three pairs of boots, polished to regulation shine, planted firm on concrete, and one woman, 20 years old, standing in the center of it all like she's been here before. She hasn't, but she's been preparing for this moment since the day she couldn't save her father. One of them steps close, whispers something that pretends to be friendly. His hand reaches for her belt. She doesn't move. Not yet. Because 11 seconds from now, three combat veterans will be on the ground, and the only sound in Storage Room C will be the rhythm of her breathing and the echo of a lesson that started 42 years ago in a safe house in Grenada. This is that story. Arlington National Cemetery, November 2004. The grass is too green for a funeral. That's what 10-year-old Kira Thornton thinks as she stands beside the freshly turned earth, watching men in dress uniforms fold a flag into a perfect triangle. The November wind cuts through her black dress, but she doesn't shiver. She's too busy counting the rifle shots. 21, one for each year her father served. Sergeant First Class Daniel Thornton died 3 weeks ago in Fallujah, an IED hidden beneath a pile of rubble on a street that wasn't supposed to be dangerous anymore. He was pulling a wounded Marine to safety when the blast took them both. The Marine survived. Her father didn't. Kira's mother stands beside her, tears streaming silent down her cheeks. But Kira's eyes remain dry, not because she doesn't feel the loss, because she feels it so deeply that tears seem insufficient, inadequate, like trying to empty an ocean with a teaspoon. A man in a Navy uniform approaches after the ceremony. Older, silver hair cropped close to his skull, ribbons covering half his chest like a mosaic of conflicts most Americans had already forgotten. He doesn't speak to her mother. He kneels directly in front of Kira, meeting her eyes at her level. She will learn later that this is Master Chief Garrett Brennan, 68 years old, call sign Flint, a legend from the Cold War era who had operated in Grenada, Panama, and Desert Storm. The kind of warrior who doesn't need to advertise because the stories do it for him. But right now he's just an old man with kind eyes and a weathered face marked by decades of sand and sun and secrets. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a folded piece of paper. The edges are worn, like it's been carried for a while. Waiting. Your father wrote this, he says. Ask me to give it to you if anything happened. She takes it with hands that don't shake, opens it carefully like the words might shatter if she moves too fast. The handwriting is her father's. Neat, precise, the way he did everything. Kira, if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. I wanted to watch you grow up, wanted to see the woman you'll become. But some things aren't up to us. I need you to remember something. The world will try to convince you that soft is the only way to be safe, that if you're quiet enough, small enough, agreeable enough, nothing bad will happen. That's a lie. Be stronger than me, baby girl. Not harder, stronger. There's a difference. Strength isn't what you take from others. It's what you protect. It's standing up when everyone else sits down. It's speaking when everyone else goes silent. It's being the person who refuses to break, even when breaking would be easier. I love you. I'll always love you. And wherever I am, I'll be watching. Make me proud. She reads it twice, 3 times, then folds it carefully and tucks it into the pocket closest to her heart. She will carry it there for the next 20 years, through high school, through college, through every moment of doubt and every instant of fear. A paper talisman against a world that would try to make her small. The old man is still kneeling there when she looks up. What did my father do? She asks. In the Navy? Brennan studies her face, sees something there that makes him pause, something that doesn't belong in a 10-year-old's eyes, a resolve, a decision already crystallizing into destiny. He was a warrior, he says finally, one of the best I ever trained. I want to be like him. It's not a question, not a wish. It's a declaration of intent, spoken with the certainty of someone who has just discovered their purpose. Brennan nods slowly. His eyes hold hers for a long moment, measuring something only he can see. Then come find me when you're ready. He stands, walks away, disappears into the crowd of mourners. Kira watches him go, memorizing his posture, the way he moves, the quiet authority in every step. Then she turns back to her father's grave. She makes a promise, not out loud, just between her and the freshly turned earth and the spirit of the man who taught her to be brave before she knew what bravery would cost. She promises she will find the old man. She promises she will become what her father couldn't live to see. She promises she will never ever break. BUD/S Training Facility, Coronado, California, June 2024, 20 years later, Hell Week, Day 3. The Pacific Ocean doesn't care how badly you want the trident. Kira Thornton learned this approximately 4 minutes ago, when the water stopped feeling like cold and started feeling like knives peeling her skin layer by layer. Now she's learning it again as another wave crashes over her head, driving her down into the sand while instructors scream through megaphones and her lungs burn for air that keeps getting stolen. Surf torture, 4 in the morning. Temperature, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind chill, significantly worse. Around her, 62 other candidates sit linked arm in arm at the water's edge, letting the Pacific pummel them into submission. Every few minutes, another one breaks, stands up on shaking legs, walks to the brass bell mounted on a post in the sand, rings it 3 times. The sound of quitting echoes across the beach like a death knell for dreams. Kira hasn't moved in 47 minutes. Her muscles stopped working properly around minute 30. Her thoughts stopped being coherent around minute 40. Now there's just sensation, cold, pressure, the desperate need to breathe, the even more desperate need to not be the one who quits. Because quitting means her father died for nothing. Quitting means the promise was a lie. Quitting means she's exactly what the world expects her to be. Small, soft, breakable. A wave takes her under. Harder this time. Longer. She tries to surface. Her arms won't respond. Her legs are concrete. The ocean is pulling her down with the casual indifference of a force that has swallowed better swimmers than her. This is it, she thinks. This is how it ends. Not in combat, not saving someone, just drowning in training because her body gave up before her will did. The darkness at the edges of her vision starts to expand. The cold becomes distant, almost warm, almost peaceful. Then a hand grabs the collar of her vest and yanks her upward with enough force to make her neck crack. She breaks the surface, gasping, choking, coughing up salt water, alive. Barely, but alive. Through salt-stung eyes, she sees a figure standing in the observation zone. Tall, broad-shouldered. Not an instructor, too old, too still. He stands apart from the training staff like a monument among men, watching her with eyes she can't quite make out in the pre-dawn darkness. He's not supposed to be there. Observers don't intervene. It's against every protocol, every rule, every principle of the training program. Instructors are supposed to let candidates fail. That's the point. That's how you separate those who can from those who can't. He just violated all of it to keep her breathing. She doesn't see his face clearly, just the silhouette, the posture of someone who's been standing watch over warriors for longer than she's been alive, a posture she recognizes from a cemetery 20 years ago. Then the next wave hits, and when she clears her eyes again, he's gone. She survives Hell Week. 62 candidates ring the bell. 62 dreams die on that beach. Hers doesn't. 3 days after it ends, when her body has started remembering how to function and her mind has started processing what she just accomplished, a message arrives at her barracks. Handwritten. Slipped under her door. No envelope. Report to Training Room 7. 1900 hours, come alone. No signature, no explanation. She goes anyway. The room is dark when she enters. Just a single lamp in the corner, casting a pool of yellow light over a training mat that's seen decades of use. The walls are bare concrete. The door is heavy steel, the kind of door that muffles sounds and keeps secrets. A figure steps out of the shadows. She recognizes him immediately despite the 20 years between this moment and the last time she saw his face. Older now, more weathered, white hair where silver used to be. But the same eyes, the same posture, the same presence that filled her father's funeral, like he owned every inch of grief in that cemetery. Master Chief Garrett Brennan. You remember me, he says. It's not a question. Arlington, 2004. You gave me my father's letter. He nods, gestures to the mat. Sit. She does. He doesn't sit. He paces instead, moving with an economy of motion that comes from decades of combat training. No wasted movement. No unnecessary gesture. Everything intentional. Everything precise. You passed Bud S., he says finally. Congratulations. You're now one of fewer than 30 women in history to earn the Navy SEAL Trident. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. He stops pacing, turns to face her directly. His eyes catch the lamplight and hold it like weapons. Because now I'm going to teach you what they don't cover in the official curriculum. Sir? He moves closer. His voice drops to something between a whisper and a warning. I'm going to teach you what saves your life when your own brothers become your threat. She doesn't understand. Not yet. But something in his tone, something ancient and angry and absolutely certain, tells her she will. And when she does, she'll wish she didn't. Brennan begins to speak, and for the first time, Kira learns the truth about her father's legacy. Your father, he says, Daniel Thornton, one of the finest warriors I ever trained. I taught him at Camp Pendleton in 2003. Pre-deployment training for Fallujah, close quarters combat, unconventional techniques, things that don't appear in any manual because manuals get people killed. She listens, doesn't interrupt. Her father rarely talked about his training. Now she's learning why. He used what I taught him twice in Iraq. Saved 3 Marines in situations where weapons weren't an option. Wrote me a letter afterward. Said he'd never forget it. Said it changed how he understood what the human body could do. Brennan pauses. His jaw tightens. Old grief surfaces in the lines around his eyes. 3 weeks after that letter arrived, the IED hit. I got the notification while I was training another class. I kept training. Grief doesn't stop the mission. The next class needed what I knew, and the one after that, until the knowledge outlives the teacher. Why are you telling me this? Because of what happened 30 years before your father died. He sits now, across from her, close enough that she can see the weight of decades in his eyes, close enough that she can smell gun oil and old leather, and the particular exhaustion of a man who has seen too much and forgotten nothing. Grenada, he says. 1983, I was 27. Got cornered in a safe house outside St. George's by 3 Cuban soldiers. No weapon, no backup, just me and 3 men who thought numbers meant victory. He holds up his hand, points to a specific spot on his forearm, 2 inches below the elbow. Radial nerve cluster. Right here. You hit it right, their hand becomes meat. No strength debate, no size advantage, just nerve disruption and gravity. I took down all 3 in under 15 seconds. Walked out of that safe house with nothing but bruised knuckles and a new understanding of what the human body is capable of when you know where to strike. She memorizes the location instinctively. Her mind is already cataloging, already preparing. But that's not why I'm teaching you this. Then why? Because of what happened 12 years after Grenada. His voice changes, hardens with old grief that time hasn't softened. Persian Gulf, 1995. A Navy nurse named Catherine Webb, good sailor, better person, 26 years old with a smile that could light up a carrier deck. He pauses, swallows something that might be rage or sorrow or both. 3 men cornered her in a supply room below deck. They wore the same uniform she did, served under the same flag, pledged the same oath, and they decided that gave them the right to take what they wanted. Kira's hands curl into fists. She doesn't notice. She survived, Brennan continues, physically, but she never came back from it. Not really. Left the Navy 6 months later. Last I heard, and this was 10 years ago, she couldn't be in a room with more than 2 people without panic attacks. Couldn't sleep without medication. Couldn't trust anyone in uniform ever again. Couldn't trust anyone at all. His eyes meet hers. I knew her, Kira. Trained with her husband before he died in a helicopter crash in Somalia. She was family, And I watched her become a ghost because three men decided their wants mattered more than her humanity. The room feels smaller now, the shadows deeper. I swore that day, Brennan says. Never again. I don't care what the rules say. I don't care about protocol. I don't care about the chain of command or the old boys network or any of the systems that protect predators and sacrifice prey. If I can teach someone to protect themselves, I will. Every time. No exceptions. And my father? Your father was one of my students after Catherine. Not the first, not the last, but one of the best. He stands. The weight of memory seems to press him down even as he rises. After him, I taught 17 others, all women, all warriors, all serving in environments where the enemy doesn't always wear a different uniform, where the threat sometimes sleeps in the next bunk, where the danger shares your mess hall and knows your schedule. He holds her gaze. You're number 18, Kira. Don't waste it. They train for 8 weeks, not every day, not on any schedule that appears in official records. Just when Brennan determines she's ready for the next lesson. Always in back rooms no one uses anymore. Always after hours when the base is quiet. Always with doors locked and lights dim and no witnesses except the concrete walls. He doesn't teach her to shoot better. She already shoots expert marksman, has since her second week of training. He doesn't teach her to run faster. She already maxes every physical standard the Navy can throw at her. He doesn't teach her tactics or fieldcraft or any of the skills the Navy has already drilled into her for months. He teaches her how to break a man twice her size using nothing but anatomy and timing. The first technique is the radial nerve strike. Brennan explains it like an engineer describing a bridge collapse. Specific, technical, ruthless. The radial nerve controls everything from your thumb to your index finger. Grip, dexterity, the ability to hold a weapon or make a fist. It's exposed right here. He taps his own forearm at the precise location. Most people think strength comes from muscle. That's amateur thinking. Muscle obeys nerves. Cut the signal, the muscle becomes dead weight. You don't need to overpower someone. You just need to know where the body stops obeying the brain. She practices the strike 217 times before he nods approval. 218 before he says she's ready for the next lesson. The second technique is the MCL sweep, medial collateral ligament, the stabilizing structure on the inside of the knee. A piece of connective tissue the width of a thumb that holds the entire leg together when you pivot or twist or do anything that requires lateral stability. 40 pounds of lateral force applied to a space designed to handle 10. Panama, Brennan says. 1989. We were hunting Noriega's inner circle. I got separated from my team in a government building. One of his guards found me in a hallway. He had 80 pounds on me, 2 inches taller, arms like tree trunks. He demonstrates the motion, a low, sweeping arc that targets the inside of the knee. Didn't matter. None of it mattered. Knees aren't built for sideways movement. You hit the MCL right, the leg collapses. Not because you're stronger, because physics doesn't negotiate, because anatomy doesn't care about bench press numbers. She practices until her shins bruise, until she can execute the sweep blind, until the motion is so ingrained that her body moves before her brain finishes processing the threat. The third technique is the tracheal redirect, the simplest in concept, the most dangerous in application. You don't need to crush the windpipe, Brennan explains. That's movie nonsense. You just need to redirect momentum, use their own force against them. Neck meets hard surface at speed. The brain shuts down non-essential systems for 6-7 seconds while it figures out if the spine is still intact. That's your window. He looks at her with eyes that have seen too much and forgotten nothing. You'll know when you need this. And when you do, don't hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. Precision keeps you breathing. The space between those two things is where warriors live or die. On the final night of training, 3 weeks before she ships out to Fort Bridger, she asks the question that's been building since their first conversation. Why me, specifically, out of everyone you could have chosen? Brennan is silent for a long time, long enough that the shadows in the room seem to grow darker, long enough that she thinks he won't answer. Then he speaks, and his voice carries something she hasn't heard before. Something that sounds almost like hope. Because of your father, he says. And because of what I saw at his funeral. What did you see? He looks at her directly. No deflection, no military distance. A 10-year-old girl who didn't cry. Not because she didn't feel it, because she felt it so deeply that crying would have been a distraction from what she really needed to do, which was decide who she was going to become. He stands, walks to the door, stops with his hand on the frame. I've been watching you for 20 years, Kira, waiting to see if that girl became the woman I thought she would. He pauses. She did. He opens the door but doesn't leave yet. Your father would be proud, but more importantly, he'd be relieved. Because he always worried about you. Wondered if you'd be safe in a world that doesn't always protect people who deserve protection. What would you tell him, if you could? Brennan considers the question. When he answers, his voice is steady, but his eyes are bright with something that might be tears in a man who probably hasn't cried in 40 years. I'd tell him she doesn't need protecting anymore. She became the protector instead. The door closes behind him with a soft click. Kira sits alone on the training mat, the air still warm from their session, her body still humming with muscle memory and purpose. She doesn't move for a long time. She's thinking about her father, about Brennan, about Catherine Webb, the Navy nurse who became a ghost, about the promise she made at Arlington and the training that will help her keep it, and about Fort Bridger, where in 3 weeks she'll need every second of those 218 repetitions. She just doesn't know it yet. Fort Bridger, Wyoming, February 2025. The guard at the gate doesn't salute, doesn't even look up from his phone when Kira Thornton steps out of the government shuttle, duffel bag slung across her shoulder like it weighs nothing. His uniform is wrinkled, his boots are scuffed. His entire posture communicates a profound indifference to everything except whatever's on his screen. February wind cuts across the Wyoming landscape, bitter and sharp, the kind of cold that finds every gap in your clothing and reminds you that comfort is a privilege nature doesn't recognize. She's used to it. Hell Week taught her that cold is just data, pain is just information, and discomfort is the price you pay for becoming someone who refuses to break. The guard waves lazily toward a cluster of bleached white trailers in the distance, temporary structures that have become permanent through bureaucratic inertia. Admin's that way. You'll figure it out. No inspection, no questions, no acknowledgement that she just spent 8 months becoming one of fewer than 30 women in history to earn the Navy SEAL Trident. She doesn't need his acknowledgement. His opinion of her is irrelevant. His awareness of her is a liability. The less he remembers, the better. The facility sprawls before her like a military purgatory. Rows of identical structures that all need paint. Half-dug fighting pits turned to mud by the February thaw. Vehicles that should have been decommissioned during the Clinton administration, rusting quietly behind chain-link fences. A haze of cigarette smoke curls from a side shed where 3 men stand watching her approach. Not hostile, not friendly, just watching. The way you watch a moving object that doesn't quite belong in the frame. The way you watch something you're still deciding how to categorize. Kira keeps her stride controlled, neutral, unbothered. That walk took 3 years to perfect. The kind of movement that doesn't invite conversation, doesn't project fear, doesn't give anyone a reason to remember her face or wonder what she's thinking or decide she needs their attention. At Bud S, they taught her to carry a boat on her head for 12 miles without stopping. They taught her to swim 2 miles in under 75 minutes while instructors screamed inches from her face. They taught her to function on 4 hours of sleep across 5 days while the Pacific Ocean tried to drown her every morning at dawn. But nobody taught her how to walk through a room full of men who've already decided she doesn't belong. She learned that on her own, trial and error, instinct and observation. Watching how other women move through hostile spaces and learning from their mistakes. Inside the holding unit, a staff sergeant hands her a locker key without looking up from his monitor. His name tape reads, Hendricks. His posture reads boredom that is calcified into resentment. Your rotation's limbo, he says, voice flat as the Wyoming plains stretching in every direction. 1 week, maybe 2. Transfer order goes active next quarter. Translation. You're here, but you don't matter. You're furniture that breathes. Fill the space, don't cause problems, and wait until the paperwork moves you somewhere else. She nods once, takes the key, moves past two rooms of men in various states of undress and indifference. They measure her as she walks, not with words, not with gestures, just with eyes that communicate everything language would only make messy. They clock her frame, 5'7", athletic build that suggests speed rather than power, shoulders that carry tension like coiled steel. No unit patch on her jacket yet. Navy insignia, yes, but no team assignment visible. No deployment record on display. Just fresh pipeline completion and the kind of youth that makes certain men assume inexperience equals opportunity. From the soft tension behind her shoulders to the lack of drag in her duffel bag. From the way her boots land silent on linoleum to the absence of jewelry, makeup, or any signal that she's interested in being noticed. New, young, alone. And more importantly, leaving soon. Someone says it low as she passes, quiet enough to deny if confronted, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Short timer. It's not mocking, not even cruel. It's identification, category, type. Short timers aren't staffed on permanent duty, aren't protected by established relationships, aren't dangerous because they won't be around long enough to make trouble. They're just passing through, and everyone in Fort Bridger knows what that means. She claims her bunk with precision. Top rack, corner position, boots squared beneath the frame, duffel nested against the locker, with everything inside arranged for quick access. She doesn't ask who sleeps nearby, doesn't unpack beyond the essentials. Just sits on the edge of the mattress, spine upright, palms flat on her knees, gaze loose and unfocused like she's looking at something 1,000 yards out. She's not trying to join this temporary community. She's trying to blend into it, become background, avoid notice. But that's the problem with silence in rooms like this. It draws exactly the attention it's trying to avoid. By dinner, the entire East Wing knows three things about her. 1, Navy. 2, pipeline complete. 3, barely 20 years old. They don't need anything else. The rest they'll fill in themselves with assumptions and projections and whatever stories best serve their purposes. At chow, someone cracks a joke loud enough to carry across 3 tables. Bet she hasn't even seen a bar fight. Someone else answers without laughing, building on the premise. Bet she hasn't even seen a bar. She doesn't flinch, doesn't react, keeps eating her food with the mechanical efficiency of someone who understands that meals are fuel, not social occasions. That absence of reaction seems to bother them, because in a place where boredom and testosterone compete for dominance every hour of every day, a quiet woman in uniform is never just background noise. She's a puzzle that demands solving, a silence that demands filling, a trigger waiting to be pulled. They just haven't decided how yet. Late afternoon, 4th day at Fort Bridger. The recreation area outside the equipment cage is technically neutral ground. Wooden benches weathered gray by Wyoming winters. A metal thermos passing between hands, filled with coffee that tastes like it was made last week. Boots off, shirts loosened, jackets unzipped despite the cold. Post-training stillness. Bodies exhausted but minds still circling, looking for stimulation, looking for something to chew on to pass the time until the next obligation. Kira isn't part of the group, not really. She's cutting through on her way to the supply depot when one of them calls out. Hey, Navy. She could ignore it. Probably should. But ignoring direct address creates its own problems. Signals fear or contempt, either of which would make things worse. She stops, turns, keeps her face neutral. Yeah? One of them, older, maybe mid-30s, sergeant's stripes on his jacket, gestures vaguely in her direction. Where you headed next? After this hole? Orders say East Coast. Her voice is flat, minimal, designed to close conversations, not open them. But someone else picks up the thread, voice pitched just low enough to sound casual, harmless, just making conversation to pass the time. So you got anyone waiting on you back there? Family? Boyfriend? She doesn't answer immediately, not because she's caught off guard, because she's calculating, measuring, deciding how much information to share with men who have no right to it, but will interpret refusal as challenge. Finally, no. That answer lands differently than they expected. A pause. A look exchanged between two of them. Eyebrows raised. Interest kindled. One of them smirks. Not unkindly, not kindly either. Just curious. Career first, huh? She nods once. Keeping it simple. Discipline matters. Another pause. Longer this time. The group dynamic shifts almost imperceptibly. What started as idle curiosity has become something more focused. Then the question changes direction. Still casual on the surface, but pointed underneath. So what about before all this? You know, relationships, experience. She turns to face them fully now, recognizes that the conversation has moved into territory where lies will be remembered and used against her later, where evasion will be interpreted as weakness, where the only path forward is the truth delivered without apology. I'm a virgin, she says, saving myself. The silence that follows isn't confusion, it's recalculation. Someone lets out a laugh, too fast, too loud, startled. The kind of laugh people use to buy themselves time when something doesn't fit the shape they expected. No way. She doesn't smile, doesn't argue, doesn't soften it. I'm serious. Another laugh. Thinner this time. Less certain. Someone shakes his head like he just heard a punchline that didn't land. You're kidding. I don't kid about things like that. That's when it happens. Not the laughter, not the words, the change, the way their eyes stop skimming past her and start measuring her. The way bodies shift on benches, weight redistributing, postures adjusting. Like a group that's collectively leaned forward without any individual deciding to move. One of them tilts his head. Older, quieter than the rest. Eyes that calculate rather than react. He speaks almost thoughtfully, like he's stating a natural law rather than expressing an opinion. That's not how this world works. No anger, no threat, just a statement delivered with absolute certainty, like gravity, like thermodynamics, like something that simply is. The others don't challenge him, don't need to, because in that moment, something crystallizes between them, an idea so ugly in its simplicity that it doesn't need explanation. She's not experienced, not hardened, hasn't been tested in the ways they consider essential, which in their minds means she's not finished yet, and they're just the men to complete her education. 3 men emerge from the group over the next several days. They don't announce themselves, don't hold meetings, don't do anything that would appear on any report or raise any flag with command. They just gravitate toward each other, find each other in hallways, exchange looks that carry whole conversations, build something without ever speaking its name out loud. Damon Vickers, 31, Navy, the one who always speaks last in group conversations, letting others commit before he reveals his position. Cold eyes set in a face that might have been handsome once, before something soured behind it. Controlled movements that waste nothing. Every gesture calculated, every word measured. A planner. 3 steps ahead, always. Chaos made him uncomfortable. Control made him dangerous. She learns his story later, pieced together from fragments and whispers, and the way other men talk about him when they think no one important is listening. 3 years ago, Damon was passed over for promotion. The position went to Lieutenant Sarah Hollins. Qualified, competent, better suited for the role by every objective measure. She had more deployments, better evaluations, a cleaner record. The selection board didn't even deliberate long. She was simply the better candidate. But Damon didn't see qualifications. He saw theft, saw a system that had decided he wasn't enough, saw his entire career narrative, the story he told himself about his inevitable rise, rewritten by forces he couldn't control. He filed a complaint. It went nowhere because there was nothing to complain about. He requested a transfer. Denied. He watched Hollins get promoted again 6 months later, while he stayed exactly where he was, stuck in place while someone he considered inferior rose above him. That wound never healed. It calcified, hardened into something that wore a uniform and followed orders, but harbored something toxic underneath. Something that had been waiting for a target, for an opportunity, for someone to blame. Kira Thornton walked into Fort Bridger and became that target. Trent Holloway, 29, Marine. A scar runs through his left eyebrow from some bar fight he wears like a medal. Big, loud when he wants to be. Physical presence that fills doorways and dominates spaces, arms thick as fence posts, neck like a tree trunk. He's the enforcer, the muscle, the one who turns plans into action. Not smart enough to scheme on his own, not patient enough to wait for perfect conditions, but dangerous in the way that blunt instruments are dangerous. Effective when pointed in a direction and given permission to move. Reed Garrison, 28, Army, the follower, the one who laughs at jokes 2 seconds after everyone else, checking first to make sure laughing is the right response, the one who waits to see which way the wind is blowing before committing to a position. He's the weakest link, the one who needs the group's approval to feel like he exists, the one who would never do something like this alone, but will absolutely do it with others because their certainty becomes his certainty and their justifications become his permission. And somewhere underneath the conformity and the desperate need to belong, there might be something else, a sliver of conscience that hasn't quite been smothered yet. But right now, he's just another body in the room, another pair of hands that will do what the others decide needs doing, another voice that will echo whatever the group decides is true. Together, they don't form a conspiracy. They form a consensus. The conversations around her change after that. Not louder, quieter. Not more obvious, more subtle. They stop including her entirely. Inside jokes accumulate too fast for any outsider to follow. References build on references in an architecture of exclusion. Some people don't get it yet. She'll understand soon. It's better when it's not a choice. They don't say the words directly. Don't need to. The meaning travels through tone and implication and the spaces between sentences. Through the looks exchanged when she enters a room, through the way conversations pause when she passes and resume when she's gone. She's a problem, a deviation from the natural order they've constructed in this forgotten corner of Wyoming. A challenge to assumptions they didn't even know they were making until she showed up and made them visible. And problems get solved. Kira notices the shifts. Her locker gets moved 2 inches overnight, subtle enough to dismiss as coincidence, obvious enough to signal that hands have been there while she slept. Her PT schedule starts overlapping more often with theirs. Not every session, just enough to establish pattern, to make her presence predictable, to learn her routines. She stops hearing her name from anyone except the duty roster. Only titles now, only categories. Navy girl, short timer. Number 20, like she's a training exercise rather than a person, a puzzle to be solved rather than a human being to be respected. And still, she says nothing, reports nothing, changes nothing about her external behavior. That's what they don't understand. They think silence means they're getting closer, that her lack of reaction means they're winning, that quiet equals compliance. But her silence is distance, measurement, patience, timing. It's the same silence that precedes a sniper shot, the same stillness that comes before an ambush springs. While they're deciding who gets to do what, she's already mapping which halls have working exit alarms and which don't. She's noting which corners have blind spots in the security camera coverage, which doors open outward, which rooms have windows large enough to exit through. She starts walking the perimeter during downtime, never through the center of spaces, always near doors, shadows, walls, always with her back protected. She doesn't carry a knife, doesn't need one. What Brennan taught her doesn't require weapons, just knowledge, just precision, just the willingness to use them when the moment demands, because she can hear it now, what they're building together without ever saying it out loud. Not a plan in the formal sense, a philosophy, a shared understanding that needs no coordinator because everyone already knows their role. One night, drifting towards sleep, she catches a phrase through thin walls, 3 voices she now recognizes. Words that confirm what she's already suspected. If we don't teach her what it means now, someone else will. And worse, it's better this way, like training. We're doing her a favor. They believe they're helping her. That's the most terrifying part. 3 days before her transfer orders activate, she finds a note under her pillow. Handwritten. Block letters pressed hard into cheap paper. No signature. They're planning something. Get out. She reads it once. Studies the handwriting for any identifying characteristics. Finds none. The block letters are designed to be anonymous. She folds it carefully, walks to the incinerator behind the mess hall, watches it burn to ash, the edges curling orange before collapsing into nothing. Then walks back to her bunk, sits down, and begins the final mental rehearsal. Radial nerve strike, MCL sweep, tracheal redirect, 218 repetitions each. Muscle memory so deep it bypasses conscious thought entirely. Brennan's voice echoing in her memory. You'll know when you need this. She knows. And when they come for her, she'll be ready. Not because she's afraid. Fear is just data, like cold, like pain. Because she refuses to be the lesson someone else learns from too late. Refuses to become another Catherine Webb, another ghost haunted by what was taken rather than defined by what she protected. The question she doesn't ask, the one that flickers at the edge of her mind before sleep takes her, is simpler. Who wrote the warning? The orders arrive without ceremony, no announcement, no briefing, just a quiet update in the system that she checks during her morning routine, and a folded paper slid across a desk by a clerk who doesn't even look up. Reassignment confirmed. Transit window, 24 hours. New unit, new location, new chapter. She doesn't smile, doesn't celebrate. This place has always been temporary. She's known that from the moment she stepped through the gate. What she hasn't realized, what crystallizes now with cold clarity, is how much her imminent departure matters to them. Because once the word spreads, the air changes. Not all at once. Not obviously, just pressure. Like a weather system building on the horizon. Like the drop in barometric pressure you feel in your sinuses before a storm breaks. They know. Someone always knows first in places like this. A clerk with access to personnel files. A driver who hears officers talking. A man with nothing better to do than monitor other people's business. By afternoon, the information has propagated through every channel that matters. She's gone tomorrow. Last day. Last chance. Didn't think she'd make it through here untouched. That word again. Untouched. They don't say it like a hope or a disappointment. They say it like a loophole. Because leaving means she won't be around to complain, won't be there to stir things up, won't have time to become a problem. And more importantly, she won't have the established relationships that might protect her. Won't have allies who would ask questions. She's passing through, and no one investigates what happens to people who are already gone. The approach comes late in the day. Damon Vickers, casual posture, easy smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Body language carefully calibrated to communicate harmlessness. Final clearance walkthrough, he says. Inventory reconciliation. One last check before you turn in your badge and keys. It's routine enough to pass without comment. Everyone does some version of it before transfer. Paperwork that confirms paperwork. Signatures that authorize signatures. The location is clean, legitimate, close enough to normal foot traffic that nothing feels overtly wrong, but tucked just far enough from the main flow to give privacy. Storage room C. Someone else adds, voice pleasant and unremarkable. Won't take long, just dotting I's and crossing T's. She hesitates for exactly one breath. Not because she doesn't see it. She sees it perfectly, has been seeing it build for days, the way they've been positioning themselves, the way they've been learning her schedule, the way this moment was always coming from the first time they exchanged those calculating looks after she told them the truth about herself. Walking away now would mean confrontation, would mean noise, questions she doesn't have proof to answer yet, would mean being labeled as paranoid, hysterical, difficult, all the words they use to dismiss women who recognize danger before it becomes undeniable. And worse, it would confirm what they already believe about her, that she's fragile, that she'll freeze, that she's exactly what they think she is, a target that doesn't know it's being hunted. So she nods once and walks in. The door shuts behind her with a sound that's softer than she expected. No slam, no dramatic click of a lock engaging. Just a quiet seal of rubber meeting metal, air pressure equalizing, a room becoming contained. They think that means control. They think time and walls have cornered her. They think the closing of that door has changed the balance of power in their favor. What they don't understand is that she's been training her entire life for moments exactly like this. Moments where everything narrows, where excuses fall away, where the difference between victim and survivor comes down to choices made in fractions of seconds. As the room settles into stillness, she adjusts her stance. Not defensively, that would signal awareness. Not aggressively, that would provoke premature action, just enough to feel the floor beneath her feet, to measure the distance between bodies, to count the exits she memorized 3 days ago when she first started mapping this facility. They believe this is her last day here, that whatever happens next will stay here. They're right about one thing. She will be gone tomorrow. But what happens in this room is going to follow them for a very long time. Not quiet from respect. This silence follows certainty, the silence of men who believe the outcome's already decided. She counts 3 of them. Damon Vickers, leaning against the storage cage, clipboard in one hand as a prop, the other resting flat on a bench that doesn't belong in this room. His face is calm. His eyes are hungry. Trent Holloway, positioned near the door, scar catching the fluorescent light, arms crossed over his massive chest. Weight forward, ready to move. Reed Garrison, just stepped left to cut off the angle toward the secondary exit. Subtle movement, but she catches it. Triangulation complete. None of them smile. None of them laugh. They're not performing now. They're activating. Damon gestures to the bench. Sit down. She doesn't move. Doesn't speak. Trent adds, voice flat as concrete. Standard protocol. Everyone does it. Still nothing from her. Then Reed, the biggest one, takes a slow step forward and speaks the line that removes any remaining doubt. Take the uniform off. He says it like a procedure, like a training instruction, like she's a recruit who missed the briefing and he's just catching her up on what everyone else already knows. She meets his eyes, and it's only then that she realizes they're not looking at her like a person anymore. She's a concept now, a failure they've agreed to fix, a box that needs checking before she leaves their world and enters another one unprepared. Damon moves closer, voice almost soft, almost kind, the voice of someone who genuinely believes he's helping. This is how women get made ready. The words land flat, but with weight. They're not improvising. This script has been rehearsed, maybe not spoken out loud, but played out in their heads, refined, justified. Trent closes distance, hands extended. Not threatening exactly, just moving into guidance position, like they expect her to freeze now that escape is impossible. Like compliance is inevitable once the door is shut and the options narrow. Like every woman before her has folded at this exact moment, and she will too. That's what they believe. She doesn't freeze, but she doesn't fight yet either. She lets the moment settle, lets them believe the room has become theirs, lets them feel the confidence that comes from numbers and isolation, and the certainty that they're in control. She listens to the sounds behind the silence, the breath rate of Trent tightening as adrenaline hits, the shift of boot rubber against concrete as Reed adjusts his position, the faint creak of the clipboard being set down, hands being freed for other work. She watches the angles. Door behind Trent, wall to her left, cage behind Damon, bench in the center. Then she does something that makes all 3 of them pause. She exhales, long, controlled, and sits down, right where they told her to. No fear in her eyes, no hesitation in her spine, just obedience. They look at each other. Something flickers between them. Victory, maybe. Confusion, possibly. This is easier than expected. Adrenaline, definitely. They think they've won. They think she's complying. They think the hard part is over and everything else will follow the script they've rehearsed in their heads. The script where she cries and begs and eventually accepts that this is just how the world works. Trent moves first, approaches slowly, savoring the moment, posture wide, shoulders rolled forward like he's trying to occupy all the space in the room. Not talking now, not explaining, just claiming. When his hands reach for her arms, she doesn't flinch. She lets him touch her, lets him believe, lets his thick fingers wrap around her left wrist, lets him apply pressure, testing her resistance, lets him think that contact means control until he tightens his grip. That's his final mistake, because at that moment, she has everything she needs. The bench for leverage, the height differential from sitting while he's standing, the breath in her lungs, the muscle memory of 218 repetitions. and the distance between what they thought she was and what she's always been. She lets his weight commit forward, lets him invest in the position, lets him lean in, and then nothing else in the room matters. Not the door, not the numbers, not the clipboard. Just his body in the exact right position to break it. The first hand reaches for her arm like it has a right. No preamble, no hesitation. Just entitlement wrapped in muscle and confidence. He grips her wrist tight and pulls, angling her elbow down toward the bench like she's equipment being adjusted. His thumb presses just above the joint. Deliberate, practiced. That tells her everything. They've discussed this, rehearsed the theory. Now they're executing. Before she can respond, Reed steps behind her, plants one boot outside her left leg, and pushes his thigh forward. Subtle but effective, blocking her from rising cleanly. Just stay still, he says, not a threat. A correction, a command given to a trainee who doesn't know the drill yet. From near the door, Damon's voice comes flat and final. This doesn't take long. We're doing you a favor. One wrist restrained, one leg boxed, one breath away from collapse. Most people would freeze, would struggle ineffectively, would scream for help that isn't coming. She does none of those things because none of those things have ever saved anyone in a room like this. Instead, she adjusts her breathing, lowers her shoulders by a fraction, lets the grip tighten. And then she moves, fast, precise, absolute. Second 1 through 4. Her elbow twists against Trent's grip. Not pulling away, that's what he expects, what he's braced for. Instead, she rotates into the grip, using the resistance as leverage. His forearm locks against the edge of the bench. She uses her own weight, leaning forward and down, and drops the base of her palm straight into his radius, the bone just below the wrist, where the radial nerve cluster sits exposed beneath skin and tendon, where Brennan taught her to strike until the motion became as natural as breathing. Crack, not bone breaking, nerve disruption, the sound of a hand forgetting how to be a hand. Trent's fingers went slack. His grip collapsed. His scream came a full second later, high and sharp, the sound of a man realizing his body had betrayed him. He falls sideways, cradling his arm like it's been amputated at the wrist. Second, 5 through 7. Reed reacts on instinct. Too slow, too predictable. He reaches for her waist, probably expecting to catch a flailing target in panic. Instead, she rotates low, drops her center of gravity, sweeps her inside leg across his stance in a tight arc, fast and low. Her shin connects with the inside of his knee. Not the kneecap, that's armored, protected. The medial collateral ligament, the soft tissue that holds the joint together. 40 pounds of lateral force, a space designed to handle 10. The pop is clean, almost surgical. He doesn't even fall forward. He folds in place, face first into the concrete, with a groan that ends in a gag. Like his body is trying to process two kinds of pain at once and can't decide which deserves the scream. Second, 8 through 11. Damon charges. No hesitation now, just fury. The kind of fury that comes when a plan falls apart faster than the brain can adjust. When certainty crumbles and only adrenaline remains, he moves like a brawler. Wide steps, full weight behind the shoulders, arms reaching to grab and crush and pin. The kind of charge that works in bar fights when the other guy's drunk or scared or untrained. She lets him come, lets him get close enough to think contact is guaranteed, lets him commit every ounce of his 215 pounds into forward momentum. Then she sidesteps. Not a full evasion, just a pivot, a redirect, and uses his own forward drive against him. His neck meets the lip of the metal bench at speed, 18, maybe 20 miles per hour. Not enough to kill, enough to stun, enough to make his brain shut down non-essential systems while it figures out if the spine is still intact. He doesn't scream. He bounces, then drops. 11 seconds. 3 men. 0 hospitalizations needed, but none of them will be standing without assistance. She rises from the bench, breathing like she just finished a warm-up. Eyes calm, posture squared, hands relaxed at her sides. She doesn't spit, doesn't taunt, doesn't waste words on men who wouldn't understand them anyway. They're groaning, crawling, trying to piece together what just happened, trying to reconcile the story they told themselves about her with the reality now written across their bodies in nerve damage and hyperextended ligaments and bruised tracheas. She walks to where the clipboard fell, picks it up, holds it like it might actually have something worth signing. One of them tries to rise. Trent gets halfway up before his arm betrays him, and he drops again, gasping. She crouches beside him, just close enough that he can hear her clearly over his own ragged breathing. You did this to yourselves. Then she stands, steps back to center. Three men broken and silenced surround her like punctuation marks on a page they should never have tried to write. There are no threats left to give, only consequences. And they're still arriving. The door opens. Not dramatically, just a slow mechanical swing of the hydraulic hinge, someone entering on routine business. Two women step inside. Sergeant Sloane Crawford, 32, tall and direct, with the bearing of someone who has earned every promotion through competence. Here for a scheduled equipment check. Private Jesse Whitmore, 24. Newer to service but sharp-eyed, the kind of observer who misses nothing. They freeze immediately. Their eyes sweep the room, process the scene. Three men on the ground in various states of damage. One woman standing in the center, unmarked, unbothered, absolutely in control. One of them starts to speak. Should we? No. Kira's voice cuts through the room, different now. Not hard, not raised, just undeniable. Stay. The women stay, one against the wall, one near the equipment rack. Neither speaking, both watching, both understanding that they've just become witnesses to something that will matter. She turns back to the men, slowly, completely, and then she does what none of them expected. She doesn't beat them again. She asks them questions. What were you about to do? Silence. Groaning. Nothing coherent. What was the plan? More silence. Then say it. Out loud. So everyone in this room knows exactly what you are. Damon cracks first. The strategist. The planner. The one who thought numbers and timing and closed doors would carry the day. We were going to... He can't finish it. His voice breaks. The words he rehearsed in private sound different when witnesses are present. When the fantasy meets reality, we just wanted to... She waits, patient as stone. He looks down, humiliated beyond recovery. To take it, he whispers. Her first time, to show her how it works. She doesn't react, doesn't blink. She turns to Reed, still clutching his knee. And you? He hesitates longer, but not forever. The pain is making honesty easier than resistance. We thought she needed to be shown. Thought we were helping. And you? She faces Trent, still cradling his dead arm. He doesn't look up. Correction, he mumbles, like training, making her ready. Her head tilts slightly. Correction? He doesn't answer. Behind her, Sloane exhales, sharp, furious, controlled. Kira lets the silence stretch until it fills the room like water. Then she speaks, clearly, for all 5 people present to hear. You don't get to be feared anymore. The words land harder than the strikes ever did. You don't walk around like you're stronger. You don't hold power with your silence. Not after this. She points. Not at the men, at the women. They saw it. Then at the room itself. This space remembers. Then finally at the door. You leave when I say you can. And then she stands still. Arms folded, feet planted. Absolute authority radiating from every line of her body. They don't move. Because in that moment, no one doubts who controls this room. And then they break. Not with screams. Not with defiance. Damon drops to his knees first. A slow, humiliated descent that looks like compliance, but feels like confession. The others follow, because they're out of options, out of defiance, out of the certainty that had carried them this far. She didn't ask them to kneel. She didn't have to. That was the worst part for them. She lets them sit there in their silence, heads down, egos gutted, strength redefined. Then she turns to the women by the door. If anyone ever tries to tell you that fear is strength, remember this room. Remember what it looks like when that lie meets the truth. They nod, both of them. Something shifting in their eyes. Something that will stay with them. Then she turns and walks out. No speech, no dramatic exit line, just command burned into the air behind her. The three men stay kneeling, because standing again would mean believing they still deserve to. The shuttle to her next assignment left at 1800 hours. She didn't look back at Fort Bridger as it disappeared in the rearview mirror. Didn't need to. The memory would stay with her, not as trauma, but as proof. Proof that she could face the worst her own people had to offer and walk away standing. 3 months later, she would face enemies who wore different uniforms, who spoke different languages, who wanted to kill her for reasons of ideology and territory and ancient grievances. Those enemies would be easier, because at least they were honest about what they wanted. She never came back to Fort Bridger. Not to visit, not to check on things, not to finish what she started. And that was the worst part for them, because they had been bracing for retaliation, for investigation, for some form of official reckoning they could prepare for, fight against, eventually outlast. It never came. No phone call from military police, no investigator with questions, not even a rumor. She was just gone, and in her absence, the unit didn't heal. It rotted. At first, the three of them tried to control the narrative. She went crazy. She attacked us unprovoked. She snapped. But no one believed them, because no one had ever seen them rattled before, and now they flinched at door hinges, looked away when women walked past, spoke softer, laughed less. That wasn't normal. That was fear. They told each other it would fade, that people would forget, that life would return to normal. But people didn't forget. They remembered. Other women started walking differently around Fort Bridger, taller, more direct. Something had shifted in the air, and everyone felt it even if they couldn't name it. The men who once filled doorways and dominated spaces now barely held their ground. They became warnings rather than leaders, not because of what Kira did to them, because of what she didn't have to do. The two women who witnessed it couldn't stay silent, not because they wanted attention, because silence felt like complicity. Sergeant Sloane Crawford filed a climate complaint 3 days after Kira left, not about the specific incident. She was careful about that. Let the men's own shame do that work. About the culture, about the way women were discussed when they weren't present, about the informal power structures that protected predators and isolated targets. Private Jesse Whitmore backed her up, added details, named names. Not just the three men in that room, the others too. The ones who laughed, the ones who knew, the ones who looked away because looking was harder than ignoring. The investigation was quiet. No press releases, no public statements, just a slow, methodical review that ended with 3 transfers, 2 demotions, and 1 new commanding officer. A woman, Colonel Margaret Ashford, 48, Army, no nonsense. Zero tolerance policy in writing and in practice. Within 6 months, Fort Bridger was unrecognizable. Formal reporting structures replaced the old informal networks. Mandatory training on conduct and culture. An actual chain of command that didn't run through whoever had the loudest voice in the smoke shed. 8 more women came forward. Not about assaults, about smaller things. Comments, looks, the feeling of being measured and found wanting every time they entered a room. Sloane was promoted to Sergeant First Class, started leading integration training courses, teaching male soldiers to see female soldiers as soldiers, not as threats, not as curiosities, not as opportunities, just as people doing the same job. Jessie transferred to instructor duty at a different base, requested it specifically, said she wanted to teach the next generation before the culture poisoned them. In Storage Room C, they renamed it Accountability Bay. Used it for ethics training now. Mandatory sessions for every incoming rotation. There was a plaque outside, small brass plate, just 3 words, where silence ended. None of the instructors explained what it meant. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. 3 months after Fort Bridger, Kira Thornton was assigned to SEAL Team 3. Middle East deployment, high-value target missions. The kind of work that separates operators from everyone who just wears the uniform. Her team leader was Captain Nathan Rourke, 34, 15 years in. 2 Bronze Stars and a reputation for running the tightest squad in naval special warfare. He didn't want her on his team, not because she was a woman, because she was unproven. Pipeline complete doesn't mean combat ready, he told the commanding officer during the assignment briefing. I don't care what she did at BUD/S. I care what she does when rounds are coming downrange and the plan falls apart. When everything goes wrong and the only thing standing between mission success and body bags is the person next to you. The CO didn't argue, just handed over her file. Read it and decide. Rourke read it. He decided she'd last 3 weeks before requesting transfer. He was wrong. The squad was 6 men when she arrived. All of them older. All of them with deployment time that made her Hell Week look like summer vacation. They didn't haze her. Didn't welcome her either. Just watched, measured, waited for her to prove she didn't belong. First week, she didn't speak unless spoken to. Kept her gear squared. Hit every mark in training. When they ran, she ran faster. When they shot, she shot tighter groups. When they studied target packages, she memorized details they missed. Not to show off, just to survive. Second week, Rourke put her on point during a room clearing drill. Full kit, live rounds, 6 hostiles on paper, 2 friendlies mixed in. The kind of scenario designed to create hesitation, because hesitation in close quarters gets people killed. She cleared it in 42 seconds. No missed threats, no friendly fire. Clean. Rourke nodded once, moved to the next drill, said nothing. His silence was the first approval she'd received. Third week, Chief Petty Officer Derek Rowe, 41, former Marine Raider with a scar across his jaw from Fallujah, pulled her aside after morning PT. You're good, he said, but good doesn't mean trusted. Trust comes from bleeding together, from knowing the person next to you will be there when everything goes wrong. She looked at him, didn't blink. Then I guess we better deploy. He almost smiled. Almost. The deployment lasted 4 months, 17 missions, 3 firefights, 2 hostage situations. Kira ran point on 6 of them, took shrapnel in her left shoulder during a vehicle ambush in week 9, refused medevac, patched it in the field with Rowe's help, stayed in rotation, earned a combat action ribbon, then a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Valor Device for actions during a compound raid where she pulled a wounded teammate out of a kill zone under fire. By the time they rotated home, the squad didn't see her as a woman anymore. They saw her as Thornton, the operator who cleared rooms faster than anyone except Rourke, who could shoot a 2-inch group at 300 meters in a sandstorm, who didn't flinch when mortars came in at 0-200 and everyone else was diving for cover. Rourke wrote her evaluation personally, submitted it with a single recommendation: promote immediately, assigned a leadership track. This operator has the capability to run her own team within 2 years. Naval Amphibious Base, Coronado. October 2025. 200 people attended the retirement ceremony. Officers, enlisted, family members, former teammates from operations that would never be declassified. Master Chief Garrett Brennan stood at the podium in his dress whites, 49 years of ribbons on his chest, a trident that had seen more wars than most people could name. He gave a speech, short, direct, no sentimentality. I've served through Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and operations you'll never hear about because they're still classified. I've trained thousands, lost dozens, learned from all of them. He paused, looked out at the crowd. But the most important thing I learned didn't come from any manual or any instructor. It came from watching people choose who they want to be when the rules don't apply. When no one's watching, when the right thing and the easy thing are miles apart. He gestured to the front row. Lieutenant Kira Thornton, Silver Star recipient, SEAL Team 3. The crowd was silent. She earned that medal pulling a teammate out of a kill zone under fire. But that's not why I'm proud of her. His voice carried the weight of decades. I'm proud of her because 6 months before that deployment, she was in a room with 3 men who thought power meant taking what they wanted. And she taught them a lesson I've spent 49 years teaching. He looked directly at her. That strength isn't what you take, it's what you protect. The silence deepened. She didn't file a report, didn't seek revenge, didn't make it public. She just made sure they remembered. And because of that, dozens of women who came after her walked into that same facility and didn't have to fight the same fight. That's leadership. That's legacy. He stepped away from the podium, walked directly to her. The crowd parted. He stopped in front of her, reached into his pocket, pulled out something small, his trident pin, the original, from 1975. When he first earned it, this survived Grenada, survived Panama, survived Desert Storm, survived every operation I ran for 49 years. He held it out. Now it's yours. Master Chief, I can't. You already did. In that room. This is just metal. What you took was knowledge. And knowledge is only valuable if you pass it on. He pinned it to her uniform, right next to the silver star. Then he saluted her. She returned it. The crowd erupted in applause. She felt tears pressing. Didn't let them fall. Not here, not now. 3 years after Fort Bridger, Kira received a message forwarded through official channels. Not a letter, a video file. Subject line, for Lieutenant Thornton, from our garrison. She almost deleted it, but something made her click play. The screen filled with a classroom, high school. 30 teenagers slouched in chairs, phones hidden in laps, attention wandering, and Reed Garrison standing at the front. Older, thinner, different. Today we're talking about consent. His voice was steady, clear. Nothing like the man who had followed others into Storage Room C. I'm going to tell you about the worst thing I ever did, and the woman who stopped me from becoming something worse. Kira's hand froze on the mouse. For the next 20 minutes, she watched him tell the story. Not her name, not specifics, but the truth. 3 men, 1 woman, a room, a plan, and the 11 seconds that changed everything. She didn't report me, Reed said to the class. She didn't have to, because what she took from me was worse than any punishment. She took my belief that I could get away with it. That silence meant compliance. That power came from taking. A girl in the front row raised her hand. What happened to the other 2 men? Reed's jaw tightened. One disappeared, discharged. Last I heard, he moves from place to place, can't hold a job, can't maintain relationships. Running from something that follows him everywhere. He paused. The other one's still in uniform, but he'll never be trusted again. Never promoted, never given responsibility that matters. He's a ghost in a system that remembers what he tried to do. And you? I left. Got therapy. Spent 2 years understanding why I thought I had the right to another person's body. Understanding the difference between following and choosing. He looked directly at the camera. And now I teach kids like you, so you never become what I was. The video ended. Kira sat in the darkness of her office. Didn't move for a long time. Then she opened her email, typed 1 line. Keep teaching. Sent. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed. 1-word reply. Always. The question she never answered out loud was simpler. Who wrote the warning note? The one under her pillow? The one that said, "They're planning something. Get out." She never found out for certain. Maybe it was Reed, the weakest link, the follower who needed others' permission to act, the one who maybe, somewhere deep down, knew what they were planning was wrong but didn't have the courage to stop it directly. Maybe it was someone else entirely, a shadow conscience in a place that had forgotten what conscience meant. She decided it didn't matter. What mattered was that even in the darkest places, someone was still trying to warn the light. 18 months after Fort Bridger, Kira Thornton accepted the position. She transferred to BUDS as an instructor. First female combat instructor in SEAL history. The announcement made headlines. Not because she wanted it to, she actively avoided interviews, declined features, rejected every attempt to turn her into a symbol. But the Navy wanted the story out. Proof that the culture was changing, that women could lead, that the pipeline was open to anyone with the capability and the will. She didn't read the articles, just showed up on day 1 of Class 412 with the same attitude she'd brought to every challenge in her life. Do the work. Prove nothing. Let the results speak. Class 412 had 48 candidates. 3 of them were women. Harper Sinclair was one of them, 19 years old, former high school track star from a small town in Nebraska. Recruited after scoring in the top percentile on every physical and mental assessment the Navy could devise. She looked like she could run through walls. Tall, athletic, natural ability radiating from every movement. The male candidates noticed. Some of them made comments. quiet ones, ones they thought the instructors couldn't hear. Bet she doesn't make it past Hell Week. Too fast, no endurance. Sprinters don't survive this. Harper heard them, didn't react, just kept her head down and did the work. Kira noticed. She always noticed, because she'd been Harper once. Hell Week came in week 4. Harper sat in the same freezing water that had nearly killed Kira 6 years earlier. Same temperature, same waves, same instructors offering the same escape. But Harper had something Kira didn't have back then. She had proof it could be survived. She had Kira watching from the observation deck. She had a path already carved. She made it. Day 5. The log PT, the runs, the final evolution. When the instructors called secure, 41 candidates were left. Harper was one of them. After class, Kira pulled her aside. You made it. Harper could barely stand, could barely speak, but she nodded. Week 1, you prove you can show up. Week 4, you prove you won't quit. Now comes the part where you prove you can lead. Harper found her voice, hoarse, broken. But there. I'm ready. 6 weeks later, Harper Sinclair was named class leader. First woman in Bud/S history to hold the position. Some resented it, said it was political. Harper heard them, ignored them, focused on the work. She graduated top 15%, earned her trident, deployed 8 months later, ran 17 missions, earned a Bronze Star with Valor. 2 years later, she became an instructor, following the path Kira carved, because someone had to, because the next generation deserved to see it was possible. Coronado, California, 2030, 5 years after Fort Bridger. Kira Thornton stood on the beach at dawn, same place Brennan used to run, same water, same wind. She was 26 now, lieutenant commander, 2 deployments, 43 missions, more medals than she cared to count. But none of that mattered as much as what she held in her hand. Brennan's trident pin, the original, from 1975. He had passed in the spring of 2030, peacefully, in his sleep, 74 years old, 49 years of service, thousands of warriors trained, one legacy that would never fade. The funeral was small, the way he wanted. She spoke, briefly, said what needed to be said, then walked to this beach and stood here, watching the sun rise over the Pacific, the ocean that had almost killed her once, the ocean that had made her instead. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. A figure jogged up, slowed, stopped. Ma'am? A young voice. Female. Nervous. Kira turned. The girl was maybe 19. Civilian clothes. Athletic build. The nervous energy of someone standing in front of a legend. I'm Brianna Caldwell. I just got accepted to BUD/S, Class 445. I start in 3 months. Congratulations. Brianna shifted her weight. I'm scared. Kira studied her, saw herself, 15 years ago, standing at her father's grave, making a promise she didn't fully understand. The physical stuff doesn't scare me, Brianna continued. I can do that. But I've heard stories about the culture, about what happens when you're the only woman in a room full of men who don't think you belong. Kira looked at her for a long moment. You'll be fine. Brianna looked up, uncertain. Not because it'll be easy, but because you'll have something they don't. What? People who came before you. People who fought so you wouldn't have to. People who taught you what to do when someone mistakes your silence for weakness. Brianna absorbed that. What do I do if something happens? Kira smiled. Small. Knowing. You remember that strength isn't what you take. It's what you protect. And then you show them exactly what happens when they forget that. Brianna nodded slowly. Okay. And one more thing. Yes, ma'am. When you make it through, and you will, you come find me. Because the work doesn't end at graduation. It's just beginning. Yes, ma'am, I will. Brianna smiled, saluted, a little awkwardly, then turned and jogged away. Kira watched her go, watched the future run toward the horizon. She turned back to the ocean, held up the trident pin, let it catch the early light. Brennan's legacy, her father's sacrifice. 3 generations of warriors, One lesson passed down through blood and sweat and silence. She whispered to the waves, "Not a girl anymore. Never was." Behind her, the naval amphibious base hummed with life. Harper was teaching the next class. Brianna was preparing for Hell Week. Sloan was leading integration courses. Reed was teaching consent in classrooms across America. And somewhere in that vast machine, another woman was walking into a room where men thought they had power. She'd be ready, because Kira Thornton had made sure of it. Not by filing reports, not by seeking revenge, but by proving in 11 seconds of controlled violence and a lifetime of quiet strength, that power isn't what you take, it's what you protect. And the ripples of that truth would never stop spreading. The end of racing, the end.